loyalty program up and running from nothing is incredibly difficult.
Legal and compliance areas of those businesses are not going to move quickly to tie in a partnership with a brand new startup.
But there's certainly a core group of loyalty experts all around the world who are constantly seeking for opportunities to bring innovative thinking into the industry.
Loyalty points float in value on an exchange, and you have to be very careful around that, because once the offer of a token starts walking like a duck and looking like a duck, it could be a security duck.
Welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole, your easy to understand podcast on the blockchain and beyond. My name is Tim Lee, and thank you so much for joining me in this journey into the ever-evolving and sometimes elusive world of the blockchain. In this episode, I'll be talking with Phil Shelper from Loyalty and Reward Co., whose book Blockchain Loyalty has just been released, and Michael Bacina, partner from Piper Alderman Lawyers, who heads up their blockchain group. He also has extensive experience within the loyalty space. Is loyalty the next currency? Let's find out as we head down the rabbit hole. Nothing in the Down the Rabbit Hole podcast should be considered as investment or legal advice. The blockchain and cryptocurrency markets globally are unregulated, high risk, and constantly changing. You're advised to seek professional guidance before contemplating any opportunities within the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. I'm really pleased today to say that we've got two experts in the loyalty space that are going to give us a very interesting perspective on where the blockchain is in relation to loyalty. I'm very pleased to say we've got Mike Bacina, who's a partner of the blockchain group at Piper Alderman Lawyers. And we've got Phil Shelper, who's the CEO of Loyalty and Reward Co. and he's the author of Blockchain Loyalty. So welcome, guys. Thanks very much. I will get you to do an intro yourself so people can get an idea of who you are. But I guess overall, the key thing is we're trying to look at the blockchain industry for loyalty to get an idea of where it's actually positioning itself. So where do you fit into the industry? First of all, Phil, given you've written the book on the blockchain loyalty.
Yeah, so I focus purely on loyalty as a vertical, so going very, very deep within loyalty. We look a little bit more widely on marketing applications of blockchain as well, but really it's all about loyalty for us. So we're working across the industry with different companies on exploring applications of blockchain across loyalty programs, both in the front end, where the loyalty program might be using a crypto token to power the program, as well as in the back end, where we're integrating with loyalty platforms in order to facilitate better transactions across different systems.
Excellent. And Mike?
Well, thanks very much for having me on, Tim, and thanks to your listeners for giving us their time to listen today. So I'm the partner in the blockchain group at Piper Alderman Lawyers. So we've been advising Australia's startups and enterprises in relation to blockchain projects for quite some time now, having worked on a number of very early ICOs through to larger enterprise deployments. So I'm on the advisory board of Liven, which is an exciting loyalty project, and I have a particular interest in the cryptonomics and economics around the use of crypto assets in loyalty programs, because it's just fascinating how the intersection of consumer behavior as well as some of the legal issues that pop up and the technology can revolutionize something which has been around for quite a while. Loyalty points are very popular. I think a good example of the Canadian loyalty program Aeroplan, when it decoupled from Air Canada, became worth more than the airline itself. So it's a really exciting area with a lot of value and quite a bit of change that might come in the future.
Excellent. Well, it sounds as if we're going to have some interesting perspectives overall. I guess I'll start off by, Phil and I really first connected truly at the blockchain conference in Melbourne back in July. And Phil was talking there, and I remember him asking the question, how many of you know about blockchain? And out of about probably 250 people, maybe 300 people, all in the loyalty space, about 5 hands went up. So I guess the first question is the loyalty industry ready for blockchain yet?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes and no. Certainly, there's a large percentage of the loyalty industry who aren't really looking for innovation of any type. They're happy just to be providing points to their members, getting those points to redeem members, and sending out lots of emails in order to try and boost sales of their product or service. But there's certainly a core group of loyalty experts all around the world who are constantly seeking for opportunities to bring innovative thinking into the industry. I was at Chicago about 3 weeks ago at Loyalty Live, and Certainly there was a large number of people at that conference who were very, very interested in trying to understand everything they could about the possibility of applying blockchain to loyalty to see whether they would provide them with the opportunity to drive deeper member engagement. The number of people who are involved in these types of conversations around the world is growing rapidly.
Excellent. And what's your take on it then, Mike?
Oh, look, I think I agree with Phil. I think I was on a panel recently where a panelist from Boston Consulting Group said that there's sort of two views in the boards that he sees around blockchain and cryptocurrency. One is the boards that take the walled garden approach and say we're very comfortable in our walled garden. We have our business and our competitive moats and we don't want to change, and we're not going to do something that might disintermediate ourselves or send more value down to the customer end. And the group of people who say we're going to be disrupted out of existence, we better do it before someone does it to us. I think that as more people get to understand the power of blockchain technology, particularly in the loyalty space, they will be shifting towards it, because it's not just about having some kind of crypto token to replace loyalty points. I think we'll see results from Commonwealth Bank and Data61's pilot with the NDIS soon, which is just looking at putting transaction records onto a blockchain. I think there's an identification piece with users that's valuable to loyalty programs, and having certainty of who their customers are and tying that into other databases, having the auditability and record keeping of a blockchain system to help existing loyalty systems, as well as perhaps looking at that exciting space of using a cryptographic token in lieu of what is currently a virtual point.
Interesting, because I guess with the industry as a whole, like in a lot of different industries, there have been a number of ICOs that have started off with trying to create a dedicated loyalty point. There's one in Australia, and there's Incent, there's Loyalcoin. I'm sure you know far more of those than I do. Do you see that model of cryptocurrency trying to replace the loyalty points as being one that can work?
It can definitely work. However, pretty much all of the blockchain loyalty programs that have started up over the last couple of years are really struggling. And they're all struggling for the same reason. It's because getting a loyalty program up and running from nothing is incredibly difficult. You need to attract merchants to participate in the program. You need to attract members to join the program and start transacting with those retailers to earn the crypto token. Very, very tough. Actually, if you look at pretty much all of the dominant loyalty programs around the world, they have not started from nothing. They've started from a large customer base and they've layered the loyalty program over the top. So it's the airlines, it's the banks, it's the supermarkets, and even loyalty programs that have been independent, such as Nectar in the UK and Payback in Germany. They've managed to succeed by establishing partnerships with large companies and accessing their databases. So this is where the first wave of blockchain loyalty programs are really struggling. And for the most part, they have not been successful to date in attracting the volume of merchants and members that they need to provide price support for their crypto token.
It was always one thing that always fascinated me, that if enterprise companies have spent maybe 10, 20, 30, $50 million on an internal system, why would they suddenly go across to this token that was brand new technology, untested, and shift that? Have you seen that sort of, Mike, have you seen that sort of dialogue taking place as well in relation, because I know you deal with a lot of enterprise clients?
I think that the internal pilots by enterprise have been more popular for blockchain deployment. The legal and compliance areas of those businesses are not going to move quickly to tie in a partnership with a brand new startup, and even if they're growing rapidly and trying to offer something which in effect is taking value away. One of the fundamental characteristics of a lot of blockchain loyalty projects which are trying to seek to replace points with a cryptographic token is a fixed supply, which turns the economics of classic loyalty points on their head. And that's a really fundamental shift in how the business model operates. But leaving that aside, dealing with the regulatory issues around privacy and other things is a big deal for any enterprise or indeed any business to consider doing. So they need to have a very high level of trust that the organization they're going to partner with or use the technology from is going to work and is going to be successful and is going to keep the risk where it is currently or lower and have enough benefits. And I'm not sure that that has been well articulated by any projects in a way that gives their customers, to the extent their customers are trying to bring on enterprise, confidence. I mean, the pilots with, say, I believe it's Singapore Airlines and perhaps Emirates that's looking to use blockchain within their existing loyalty programs are the path I think that enterprise are taking, because they have full control over the system. They can see where the benefits and risks are and minimize where there's risks and hopefully maximize the benefits for them. And it may organically over time grow to have examples that cut across different industries, but I think that's going to happen by, I suppose, mergers and other acquisitions and versus a layering on top. That's where I think it's just going to sit. It's really that legal risk and compliance fear from larger enterprises going to stop a lot of these projects from getting the partnerships they would otherwise need to try and bring things in.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mike. What the conversations that we've been having with large loyalty programs also picks up on the fact that customers don't necessarily want to have a currency which fluctuates in value, particularly the airlines. So one of the core arguments the airlines are putting forward is that our customers want stability and assurance that the points that they're earning are going to maintain their value. But they provided the example of a customer who is saving up points for an annual holiday, and they're almost got enough points to get access to that free flight, and then the value of the points drops off. And so they're suddenly in a position where they're not going to be able to get what they were building towards. So that uncertainty of accessing bigger rewards is actually a bit of a turn-off for some of the bigger programs, and they feel it wouldn't resonate well with their clients. I think the opportunity for a company to introduce a crypto token is probably at this stage pretty niche. We're looking at companies like Rakuten in Japan, who have been talking about introducing a crypto token to replace their points on their program since the start of this year. They recently bought a distressed exchange in Japan, which we're assuming will be a first step in moving towards that. We're also talking with a group of people in the Philippines who want to develop a blockchain loyalty program to run over the casino businesses there, which we could see working really effectively, because if people are gambling and they're earning a crypto token for gambling and the value of that crypto token is always changing, it actually fits quite nicely with the mindset of the customer. So certainly sooner rather than later, we are going to see a good quality, good size blockchain loyalty program come to the surface with their own crypto token and be incredibly successful. It's not happened to date, but that in itself is quite exciting because the future is yet to come.
But do you see problems materializing? We're talking about cryptographic, the crypto tokens and that type of thing. If there's a decentralized token, for example, does that, and I'll point it to you as well, Mike, does that raise a question of compliance at a deeper level in terms of if you don't know who's actually on the network, are they going to trust it? I mean, because you mentioned compliance was right in the DNA of the enterprises from what you're talking with. Yeah. Is that going to be a real problem?
Look, I think if you're talking a fully decentralized loyalty program, I've been exploring this area for quite some time, and I can't really see how that would be made to work. Loyalty programs to work effectively require some level of centralized management, because you need to promote the program, you need to bring on merchants, you need to manage the member base, and you can't do that in a fully decentralized way for a loyalty program. It's too sophisticated to do it properly. Really, at the base level, the decentralized element of a blockchain loyalty program is decentralizing of the value of the loyalty currency. So the value is set by the market, dependent on supply and demand, which is the pure economics of it. But everything else really needs to be centralized to function effectively.
What are your thoughts, Mike?
Well, I think another way of looking at that is that the participants or the merchants or people who are giving the value to incentivize their customers are obviously centralized units within a network. But, there's already decentralized cryptocurrencies that could be used for that. Someone could give you some Bitcoin when you buy a coffee, and that works perfectly well and is entirely decentralized. But where a business wants to leverage some advantage of offering some form of value to their customers by demonstrating their loyalty, part of the challenge of cryptocurrencies is that the value is a little bit more visible versus, say, airline frequent flyer points are always the well-known example where there's a number of different ways you could realize the value of them that wildly differs depending on what they're being redeemed for. So you're bringing what was previously a somewhat obscured price right to the forefront, which is a big challenge. But I think Phil's right. To go to a pure decentralized loyalty system, you've got it. It's Bitcoin. Just give people Bitcoin for their loyalty and manage the information from them in a centralized system. That works. And I think that a lot of the crypto loyalty programs have to, in effect, deal with that problem. That if you're going to give someone value, why not just give them that? You could also just give them cash back. But that undermines a lot of the other, I think, points of consumer behavior that work really well in loyalty, part of which is obscuring the price.
Yeah. Yeah, so I agree and disagree with that. Certainly, we're recommending to some of our clients that if you want to move into the blockchain loyalty space, use Bitcoin or one of the other popular cryptocurrencies. And as you've just pointed out, they provide a fantastic alternative to points. In fact, if you look at the type of margin that frequent flyer programs are making on the selling of points, it's in excess of 100% for a lot of clients. Points are very expensive. Also, the frequent flyer programs are quite choosy as to who they'll partner with as well. There's a lot of exclusivity clauses there. The frequent flyer programs demand that their partners buy a certain amount every year. It might be $500,000 worth as a minimum, which causes some problems for smaller businesses as well. And of course, points expire and they can't be used. They can only be used on products that the frequent flyer program says are suitable. So there's lots of restrictions there. The reason why frequent flyer programs and other big loyalty programs have been successful is because they have managed to create a highly desirable currency. People will go out of the way to shop in different ways in order to accumulate more of this currency. So the major cryptocurrencies are a perfect alternative to that. The value that the program is spending on them, most of that gets transferred directly to the member. There's no minimum that they need to pay for. Anyone can participate in it. They don't expire. They can be used everywhere. So, and the best part about it is, certainly for certain demographics, they're a highly desirable currency. We think, once again, we're going to start seeing companies coming out offering Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies as an alternative. I guess the flip side of that, though, is the pure economics of a crypto token program allows the program operator to create a finite amount of their own token that they control. They can release however much of it that they like into the market and keep a huge reserve. So if they're successful in generating a lot of demand for that token through the program and the value of that program, that token increases in price through exchange trading, then they get a multiplier on the reserve. So they can make obscenely large amounts of profit just as a result of managing the tokenomics there. That's the really big play for the front-end blockchain loyalty. It's just what I find interesting. No one's managed to pull it off yet, but it is.
Well, there must be players looking at this. I mean, I know.
A lot of players.
I mean, obviously IBM and others are going to be deeply entrenched within a lot of enterprises. And I know, just out of full disclosure, I was an interim CEO of Refined that invested in Loyal.
Yeah.
So I know a bit more about that than maybe I'm able to tell. But, I mean, how do you see the enterprise players like Loyal? And maybe, Mike, if you've got some knowledge on that in terms of where it's the benefit, I guess the key benefit of the interoperability within a membership program of being able to exchange those cryptocurrency tokens in real time, but at an enterprise level. I mean, is that something that you're familiar with, Mike? Are you seeing much in that space?
I think Phil's probably better placed than I am to comment on that.
Sure.
Yeah, so Mike did talk about it before as enterprise applications probably being the main immediate opportunity for blockchain, and I'd certainly agree with that. We know that a number of major airlines around the world are already either doing full integrations with blockchain platforms such as Loyal, or they're doing proof of concepts with different partners in order to get a sense of what's happening in the blockchain space. We've talked with a number of senior players in different airlines who are working on these types of enterprise applications, and the main attitude that we're getting from it is we're still not convinced about blockchain. However, we don't want to miss out on the main game. So we're doing proof of concepts in order to make sure that as the technology evolves and as we get a better sense of where the real opportunity lies here, that we've got our fingers on it and we're able to take advantage of it.
It's interesting,
very
isn't
encouraging.
it? I mean, in a lot of enterprise space, I'm seeing generally what I call the 4 Ps in terms of there's the prototype, the proof of concept, the pilot, maybe, if you're lucky, and the puffing up of chests. In terms of there's no production-ready products that are out there yet, and that's in a lot of industries.
Yeah.
And so, I think it probably echoes, within the loyalty space that that because perhaps it's not a major problem for them, it's not top of their hit list. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of other things. I mean, like the fuel price going up and down is going to be more important to the airlines right now. So I guess if we're looking at that enterprise level, let's just take a sort of a view, maybe a bit of legal perspective here, Mike, that the blockchain provides this single source of truth where everybody shares that same information on the same blockchain. Like in a lot of the enterprise type structures of loyalty. So my question would come, if partners within a loyalty program are sharing data, what risk does that present? I mean, like the GPDR, or the GDPR, I can never get it right.
The GDPR, yeah.
Yeah, because that's a major, major issue that's only come out very recently, or comparatively recently, in the EU. What's the implications on that?
The biggest, without wishing to get into a lot of detail on GDPR, is the right to be forgotten issue around GDPR, of course, was not taking into account any consideration of blockchain technology or immutability of records on a public ledger. So there's some fairly stark incompatibility issues with the European approach to privacy and the right to be forgotten that don't work in blockchain if data is stored in a certain way and it's a public blockchain. Now, I think this could also help explain why enterprise are a little more nervous about it, because you don't want to be writing customer data to any kind of public blockchain where you lose control of the ability to change it or correct it if there's an error. However, normal privacy rules still apply in Australia, the Privacy Act, and so there is sharing of data which can occur. However, I think as enterprise and loyalty programs realize the benefits of more widespread self-sovereign ID or blockchain-based ID, I think that's going to create a different value proposition around the auditability and certainty of who the members are, because a huge part of the value from loyalty programs is in the members of the program itself's data, how they transact and interact with that program, which is very significant over time as you build up more and more data about those users. And I think that the record keeping for that, the auditability of it, is key, because ensuring that the data is accurate, if it's ever going to be sold or otherwise monetized in accordance with law, then knowing that you're making decisions based on really reliable data sources which have appropriate hashes and whatever stamped into a blockchain is going to be something that will be here in the future. It does require a reworking of a lot of internal systems or interfacing to those, but that might be a space where you might start to see some production come out. Even though it's on the more boring auditable backside, it creates a lot of value and gets around a whole lot of siloing problems, or if there's simply errors in how information is being put together. And we have a lot of problems because of the legacy issue of proprietary software everywhere and proprietary databases, in getting these databases to talk to each other and finally getting them consolidated in a form that you might use a blockchain to help audit it, even a permissioned one, I think is really useful. And the ID piece as well, as we start to see more self-sovereign ID coming out, initially it's sort of rising more in the financial services space, but it'll ultimately come through. I think that loyalty programs will really enjoy that, because there'll be benefits of being able to tie in the ID of their users across a whole range of other things and enable better sharing of information. And that kind of targeting is really only held by certain limited players like your Facebooks and perhaps to a lesser extent your Googles at the moment, because they've created themselves as such one-stop shops. And you may have airline points within various jurisdictions, airline loyalty programs that have a great deal of information about particular users, but they still don't have a particularly hefty AML or KYC when you're joining up to their programs to start with. And certainly for domestic travel, I don't know to what extent loyalty programs are tying into any ID when bookings are made. I think they still operate fairly separately as business units from collection of ID otherwise.
So you mentioned AML, anti-money laundering, KYC, know your customer. Is that something that is coming onto the radar of loyalty points? I mean, you keep hearing various people saying loyalty is the new currency. Does that actually have implications?
I think it does,
for
because
AML and KYC?
Phil mentioned earlier that there's a number of platforms that have looked to have loyalty points float in value on an exchange, and you have to be very careful around that, because once the offer of a token starts walking like a duck and looking like a duck, it could be a security duck. And while loyalty points enjoy an exemption from being financial products in Australia, there are restrictions around that. So cryptographic tokens let you muddy the waters a bit, and there could be a drift away from those exemptions over time, which leads to issues around licensing. So we may see in the future some modifications to those exemptions or some specific use cases identified as things which start to look like securities. I mean, I say to many people that there's two ways a token can end up looking like a financial product or security. One is by design and has specific features. So, for example, a loyalty point operating within a platform where the holders of the loyalty point were somehow earning a clip of some kind of fees that the system was processing could start to look a bit like a share. And then if they're pre-selling those tokens with any kind of representations that they're an investment, that's the second part. If you take pumpkins last month and try and sell them close to October 31 to people telling them they're going to make money on them, the pumpkins themselves are probably not a security, but the act of selling them and the contracts you enter into may very well be. And it's probably a mixture of those two parts that could cause cryptographic tokens involved in loyalty to start to drift into regulated spaces. But I think that as ID becomes more prevalent with self-sovereign IDs coming into the real world and cryptographically secured IDs, they're going to infiltrate loyalty because there'll be a really nice opportunity to verify who you're doing business with. So a lot of the AML KYC is restricted to financial services at the moment and is fairly painful for those who have to provide copies of ID and then wait for things to be checked. That is all the subject of a great deal of investment and automation, and it'll be very easy to spread from the financial services sector. I think, there's one of our clients, Tensorum, has their TENS ID, which is probably more of a classical decentralized self-sovereign ID, and Bron ID is an Australian homegrown one that's focusing on financial services. But once you have a cryptographically secured ID, it's child's play to use it within some other network, whether it's blockchain or not. If it's verifying your ID, it's really useful. And that's a huge benefit, I think, to loyalty programs, whether or not they're doing anything else in the blockchain space within their platform, to really know who they're dealing with and be able to tie in that ID to other data sets.
Interesting, because I mean, it just sounds as if the regulations worldwide are all over. I mean, they're completely different in different jurisdictions, aren't they? There's a lot of, within the ICO space, there's been a lot of regulatory arbitrage. I mean, if you're advising, say, a global client, well, I guess most ICOs or token offerings are going to be thinking locally but acting globally. Are they having to take into account all those regulatory issues you're talking about on loyalty points, for example?
Yes, they may act global, but they have to think local in anywhere they're operating. But that's just like any business. If you're heading overseas from Australia looking to expand,
but I guess when the blockchain space is changing so quickly, it's
that's right,
rapidly evolving and that type of thing.
But I think the issue comes about with loyalty, that you're looking to have identification of users because there's a huge amount of value in knowing who you're dealing with and what their transactions are. So there is a much stronger incentive for the operators of the loyalty programs or the designers of these platforms to ensure local compliance, because in many cases the loyalty points and loyalty programs are a specific exemption from being financial products, and they otherwise look an awful lot like non-cash payment facilities and other kinds of financial products. So you have to be very careful with it. And for the most part, there's been a whole lot of blockchain projects which perhaps so busy with doing what could be done that perhaps not as much thought was given as to whether it should be done in light of regulations. And I think that's been seen in a lot of projects in the last 2 years and has started to pull back now with a lot more focus on, as you say, a decoupling of cryptocurrencies and blockchain. I would put it as a greater focus on the blockchain technology itself as opposed to the cryptocurrencies themselves, simply because from a regulatory perspective, using a technology to do things better in business is fine. It's ultimately what it's put to and interfacing with others, whether it falls under one of the prescribed categories of something where a license is required or there'll be some kind of other compliance.
So, Phil, taking that on into account where there are challenges that are on the legal side, obviously the benefits have to, from a corporate perspective, have to outweigh all the challenges that are going on, because otherwise it just becomes, it's in the too hard basket. For an enterprise, what do you think are the top 3 benefits for an enterprise blockchain layer?
Yeah. So I don't know about the top 3 benefits, but I'll give you
your opinion.
Yeah. Look, I think this doesn't apply to all loyalty programs, but certainly the bigger ones. It's a challenge, which is that they've become so successful at providing opportunities for their members to earn points that they actually don't have enough inventory to provide to them to redeem those points. great example is airlines. They just don't have enough marginal capacity seats to be able to provide all of the demand for them. You often hear frequent flyer program members complaining about how they've got all these points, they can never find a seat. It's a big problem. Hotels, it's another really big problem because, once again, members have lots of points. They primarily want to redeem those points on a free room, particularly when they're leisure travelling. And the hotel would much rather sell that room at full rates than give it away to someone for free in exchange for points. So a lot of these big programs are constantly looking for ways to enable the members to redeem points on anything other than their core product. And that can often be quite difficult because they're working on these crappy old legacy systems that are very stable but very inflexible, and trying to network with a third-party operator to be able to facilitate that real-time redemption is a total nightmare. So one of the big opportunities for blockchain is to be able to API into that back-end loyalty platform and then connect to large numbers of different merchants and incorporate them all on the platform so that they can quite easily turn on and off rules to enable earning and redemptions across that wide portfolio, and have a lot of assurance that the transactions are going to run very smoothly and very securely. And that's, one of the use cases, particularly companies like Loyal are already exploring with. Singapore Airlines is doing it as well, and facilitating much easier redemption of points across a much wider group of retailers.
So if, say, an airline, and not naming any particular airlines, but if there are, an airline works closely with hotels, for example, and, for example, the airline knows that, say, Mike travels to the States 10 times a year, but he only stays once, in a particular hotel. Is there, from a commercial point of view, is there a structure that makes sense to enable that freedom flow of information? And then maybe we'll have a look at the legal perspective of sharing that information, and does that present high risks?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably two parts to that question. So the first one is it provides an opportunity to talk about a great example of how blockchain can be used. So at the moment, if I'm a member of a frequent flyer program and I want to go and stay at a hotel and use my points, I'm likely going to have to get a gift card for that hotel with my points and then go and redeem that gift card at the hotel. Really clunky process, terrible value, etc., etc. Now, if the loyalty program was on the blockchain and the hotel was on the blockchain, actually the hotel might have some spare capacity during the week or during a off-holiday season, and they would like the opportunity for the loyalty program's members to redeem points on a free room. So they could actually go into the system themselves and set up rules that says during such and such period, the loyalty program members can redeem points on a room and get a fantastic offer without the loyalty program themselves actually having to do anything. So it provides a really great opportunity to set up these short-term offers and rules in a very secure environment in order to facilitate much better redemption behavior. Now, in terms of the data around that, actually there's not a lot of data that's being captured there because it's simply based around the transaction rather than around the hotel accessing the personal data of their loyalty program. One thing I will say is loyalty programs will do absolutely everything that they can to prevent any other company getting access to any of their data without paying for it. Right. So there's been a lot of talk around companies setting up, giving members control of their data back. And it's very noble. And if there was a situation where people could have all of their data kept in a secure data wallet that only they control and they can sell access to that data to different brands, I love the whole concept of that. So companies like Brontech are doing that sort of play, and it's really fascinating. But it would be a long time before we see any of the big loyalty programs move to that space because the data is simply too valuable. If you look at companies like Qantas Frequent Flyer, they've set up separate divisions such as Red Planet, who are specialising in taking all of the data about members and selling it to other corporates because it's so valuable. There's still a lot of data protection.
Right, so data is the new oil, isn't it? There's a lot of value in data.
Yeah.
So if they get it wrong, Mike, which hopefully nobody does, the fines I've only sort of seen the top level of the actual size of the fines, but the fines are incredibly high, aren't they?
Well, that's right. And I think that there's, we're a fairly litigious country in Australia, and America's ahead of us on many of those points. And I think that there's that exposure makes businesses be very cautious. So I think the key driver around that personal information being shared is, of course, the value of it itself. But a secondary point is they don't want the bad press or the fines. But the value of bad press is probably in excess of the fines when you get down to it. I think that the damage in trust of, say, banks breaching AML compliance in the long run probably hurts a lot more than a very significant fine that they have to pay that shows up in the newspaper and goes away. I think it's a bigger issue perhaps for smaller players who might just do something and not realise the privacy requirements. But I think that the combination of the value of the data and the rules around sharing data means that from a legal perspective, a lot of businesses will try and address it by giving you, Qantas is a good example, having the Qantas store to buy things, and they source the various things wherever they want to source them, so that they don't have to hand off the data to someone else, even if they're acting almost as an agent for someone selling various products in the store. I don't know if that's the case, but by being an intermediary in a transaction or saying, come to such holidays, which might be a separate division, and you can redeem your points here for this, then they can keep that control over what's the price we're getting this for, using their size to buy products at better prices, and then being able to arbitrage that on the points around that value. It's but I think something Phil said earlier about the challenge of redemption is telling, and is a dangerous point for crypto loyalty, in that loyalty points struggle to have enough redemption available. And so if a point can be freely traded, the obvious risk to that is that if you could sell your frequent flyer points in any airline today, but you can't redeem them for a flight, if you've just come off an unsuccessful booking trying to get a flight for points, saying, well, this is very frustrating, and then you have the option to sell them for some money, then I think there's a lot of people out there who will take the view of, well, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, better to just sell it for whatever price you might happen to be able to get for it now. And I think there's grey market trading of frequent flyer points which occurs in any event, but it's fairly underground. So there's already sort of that secondary shadow market of being able to dispose of points for some price. It's just not as easy as can occur in the cryptographic token world. So I think that the laws are fairly closely aligned with the economic interests around privacy, but obviously a lot of money being spent on keeping the data safe. And I agree that the handing over control to individuals of data is an exciting development, and I think it's going to keep on pushing on. And you may see something in the future where you have a self-sovereign ID which has some rules around being able to activate a right to be forgotten within a cross-chain or storage of that signed transactions from that token before, to be able to pull out, in effect, someone's record of who you were in a transaction. But there's a huge disincentive for businesses that really want to collect that data. Even if they are selling it in a de-identified way, they still need to start with the data being identified in the first place to someone, so they can then say, well, we've got X number of people who are individuals, and we know they are, and we've de-identified them and aggregated the data to help you. But I think the idea of someone plugging in through an API and being able to say, oh, we have 20,000 members who like to stay at a particular location, particular time of year, creates a real opportunity for that kind of automated third party coming in. But they'll still need to have their standards. As Phil mentioned, they're programs are very exclusive with their partners, because they can't risk, a highway side motel that's empty on many nights just coming in and saying, oh, well, if someone will pick up the tokens from me from X price, we can then offer the rooms for this many points, and also we get the good brand of an airline or another loyalty program to help us fill the hotel, and we'll sting everyone on extras. So there's strict requirements to get into any contractual arrangement with a loyalty program and be a partner for a reason. And I don't think that's going to change in a big hurry, but there may be ways to, in the future, automate getting on those, I suppose, almost private compliance levels in order to take part in a loyalty program, which may end up being relating to favorable reviews or ratings online and things of that nature, to try and get it to an automation point. Because the end of the game with blockchain is an automation and a reduction in the need for people to do boring and tedious tasks. So people are going to keep driving towards that, and there's going to be some innovations that will come out that will hopefully overcome some of these challenges.
It's really interesting. Just hearing you both talk, and there's a lot of in-depth experience there, which is fantastic. I mean, I guess the key thing is there are a lot of headwinds in the loyalty space then, aren't there, to adopt blockchain in the very, very short term. I think from what we're sort of saying is people don't want to share or they really want to own their own their own data. There are problems if you get the sharing of that data wrong. The technology is new. The cryptocurrency space is decentralized, presents other risks. It's almost as if the loyalties players may say, oh, this is just, it's all too hard. And maybe that explains why only 5 people put their hand up in the Melbourne loyalty conference. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think as people who are professionally involved in this space, we can see the underlying benefits are going to come through. I mean, where do you see the industry heading, say, in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. Well, look, if you look at the current state of loyalty around the world, it hasn't really evolved materially in the last 30 years. So prior to the 1980s, the dominant loyalty currency in the world was stamps, so headed up by S&H Green Stamp, but there was other providers around the world. And people would go and shop at different retailers and earn physical stamps, and they'd then stick them in a book, and then they would get a catalogue of products that they could buy for a certain number of books. And that was a dominant loyalty model for 90 years, and that was only changed when frequent flyer programs came along, starting with AA in 1980. Introducing miles as a new currency in order to offset the issues of the US government opening up the borders to wider competition. So that then, miles and points then became the dominant loyalty currency and model ever since then. The real question for me with respect to blockchain is blockchain going to be the thing that reinvents loyalty and leads to the next generational change? Or will companies just use it in order to just do what they're doing a little bit better? Now, when I first started looking at it and when I got really excited about crypto tokens and the idea of scarcity and everything, my initial thought was we could completely reinvent loyalty here. And the big opportunity is to bring the customer back into the center, because the customer used to be at the center back in the 80s, pushed aside as soon as frequent flyer programs realized that they could make obscenely large amounts of profit out of loyalty programs. And so the customer's data is taken from them. They get terrible value out of the points. The points can only be used on a restricted number of rewards and so on and so forth. The holy grail here is that the customers put back in the center. They own their own data. They get much better value out of the tokens. They can be used anywhere. They don't expire and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Now, whether that actually happens or not, it's still going to play out. Certainly in the short term, in the next 3 to 5 years, I think what most companies will do is explore blockchain as a way to do what they're doing a little bit better, which means more ways to redeem, real-time redemptions, better interoperability, all that sort of stuff. But the hope is that actually we can do so much more.
And Mike, what's your...
I think I'd agree with everything Phil said. I think that a lot of real-world blockchain deployments in the next 5 years provide an opportunity for enterprise to replace these really old legacy systems that weren't built with the security needs of today's online environment in mind. And that is attractive when there's a complicated system that's really old that needs to be replaced. You need a compelling reason to replace it with something better. But I think there's a lot of inherent features, leaving aside the token piece of blockchain systems which haven't been developed yet, but can replace something like creaking old legacy systems that are driving this. Because from a loyalty perspective, tracking that ledger of points is essential because there's value in the points. And to date, it's been done in effect, a similar way to how banks would handle their ledgers of accounts by loyalty programs themselves. And that makes a very natural ability to shift to use some kind of blockchain ledger to replace that. But there's been various bubbles in crypto and misunderstanding about what the technology is and what it does. So I think that hopefully some of these pilots will drift towards that. But I think the incremental improvement is really what will happen unless there's someone out there with a really amazing value proposition that no one else has thought of in terms of using blockchain, which would be amazing if it dropped that all the incentives would align and would work. But I think it would need, as Phil mentioned at the start of the program, the need to build a marketplace effectively on both sides at the same time is really hard. So there's a huge number of challenges in that. So the incremental approach is really what we're going to see. It's more aligned with being able to address the legal issues around privacy and even contractual risk of bringing in partners. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think a good example is the internet came out of private networks. It slowly became connected. And it wouldn't surprise me in the blockchain world if we see a lot of private permissioned chains being built at enterprise level, and over time, cross-chain links occurring. And then 20 years from now, we have something that is looking a bit internet-like again, but purely on various blockchain databases that can talk to each other in ways that still enable those who set them up originally to have that level of control, which helps solve a bunch of problems. And it's not quite the utopia that your Bitcoin maximalists would like, but it's stepping closer towards it with each day. It's just a question of if and when it might get there.
So it's probably going to be, as you said, with that Steve Jobs quote, it's going to be technology that's not beautiful but is hidden.
Well, that's right. As long as it's invisible, you can still make the UX beautiful. So that's a different point. But yeah, making it invisible, I think, is key. But that's a key for all blockchain projects, because those which have found good adoption outside of the enthusiasts are those that have had really nice user interfaces that hide the fact that there is crypto involved to the greatest extent possible. And that's not dreadfully difficult to do. It just means that there's a huge amount of designers that are needed to come into the token space. I think that, we don't have time to discuss it today, but the opportunities and challenges around the legal issues with smart contracts and smart legal contracts also come into how these loyalty points programs can operate, particularly where they might allow a marketplace or others to come in and offer redemption or interact with the program. And, we need to see some more certainty from Parliament as to how smart contracts will be treated when they comprise, significant portions of an agreement between parties. I think when they comprise a small part of it, it doesn't really matter, because as long as you can see what the intent of the parties was from the clauses, how the clauses are complied with don't really matter. But as we start to see greater and greater automation and perhaps move more towards pure coders law smart contracts, if they ever get there, what recognition there is around that, I think will become quite important.
You did mention, and we'll just maybe sort of finish up on this, we're talking about the UX. Now, I know, Phil, you mentioned about this product called Liven, which is an Aussie-based one. Mm-hmm. Well, I think both of you actually know Liven or to various degrees. I mean, how are you seeing that one in the local marketplace?
Yeah, so Liven are doing a fantastic job, actually. I'm a big burrito fan, and I go and buy a burrito from Mad Mex most days for lunch and pay with Liven. So it's as simple as downloading the Liven app and registering a card, and then I just pay through the app and I earn Liven coin for my effort. So currently getting 15% back on that, which is pretty phenomenal.
15%, is it?
Yeah, so it's pretty generous. Liven are doing an amazing job in signing up a huge number of quick service restaurants within Australia to participate with some pretty generous offers. So I could pretty much earn Liven coin for eating lunch and dinner every day if I wanted to. And they've got a fantastic user interface. It's very easy to identify participating merchants, lots of geolocation, serving up of different content, and, very sleek, well-considered advertising campaigns as well.
So it seems to me as if there's a real focus on the customer from what you're saying.
Yeah. So
that the technology is hidden. I mean,
that's right.
I mean, just taking on from your point, I know you know the Liven guys very well as well, Michael. I mean, what's your sort of take on Liven?
They're a really good example of a business that's been around for a while and I think has adopted blockchain technology, but hasn't come from blockchain development at its inception. So I think they've got a few years under their belts of learning, being a startup and tackling the problem of building the two-sided marketplace. So I think they've had the benefit of perhaps a head start on many other blockchain-focused projects which have to tackle the challenge of the technology and the challenge of the marketing and the challenge of the UX. And there's no doubt they have a very beautiful UX, considerable user base, very, very broad restaurant base, and a compelling value proposition which is very simple and easy for people to understand. And I think that also differs from many other blockchain loyalty programs out there that are a lot more complicated in what the points may be, because you can access the app and pay for your meal with points which have been earned, or earn points by paying for a meal through the platform. And it's as simple as that. And I think by keeping it really simple and having a clear value proposition for both sides of that network, both the merchants and the users, they don't have to think about it being a cryptocurrency. They don't have to think about any kind of blockchain that's sitting in the background of the app running, which is essential. And that keeps it even closer to when the Liven platform used a non-blockchain-based virtual point. So as far as the users are concerned, nothing has changed. Right. And that makes things simpler, I suppose, from a legal perspective, because it is the same loyalty program that's been running from an earlier time. There are some differences, but it is not fundamentally different to what has originally been offered. So I think they're a really interesting one to watch. It's fantastic to have such a great homegrown business that's getting so much traction, and I'm probably going to go and get a burrito after this podcast.
I think it just sort of burrito bonanza, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Sort of thing.
I think just on the legal aspect of Liven, it's really interesting. So in Australia, certainly the law allows for exemptions for loyalty programs. So as far as I'm aware, loyalty points are a digital currency and therefore have financial service obligations to them. But because the government doesn't want to have every loyalty program have to get a financial services license, they put in exemptions to allow them to operate under certain rules so that they can progress. And whether it's a digital currency such as points or a digital currency such as crypto tokens, if the main purpose of the currency is to be earned and redeemed within the program, then actually you can avoid a lot of the legal issues.
Well, that's right. And if we didn't have those exemptions, then we wouldn't be enjoying our frequent flyer points today.
Exactly.
So, that's one of the reasons I think loyalty points are a fantastic use case in the current regulatory space for crypto, because you have the benefit of those exemptions. But because there are requirements to fit within that exemption, including a dominant purpose, it's not the case that a cryptographic token that's being issued for a true purpose of, for example, fundraising or to try and operate in one way can somehow just put on a loyalty element and try and get through on exemptions. It's something that needs careful consideration. But I think by quirk of how the regulatory space has evolved, it's created an opportunity there for them to move forward and perhaps do some interesting things that may not be possible in other sectors.
So maybe the loyalty blockchain space is for those pioneering burrito eating experts. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, certainly I would say so. But I think that being said, one of the main things that we're talking with our clients about is you can create a new currency, you can introduce a new technology, but you can't reinvent the rules of loyalty. The main things that make a loyalty program compelling to members is that it's simple, so simple to join, simple to understand, simple to engage with, that it delivers meaningful value is really important as well, and it has some type of emotional content. Now, the frequent flyer programs do this best by providing a sense of exclusivity and belonging. So if you get lounge access or if you get early boarding, whatever that is, and it makes you feel you're getting access to something that other people don't, humans love that type of stuff. That's really the main things. And I think what some of the early blockchain loyalty companies have done is ignored some of those rules, and it's been at their peril. So really, you do need good quality, professional, expert loyalty people involved in the project to ensure that you do get the design right and make sure that it's still going to align with everything that works.
Excellent. Well, look, we could talk for hours, but you guys have got you've got sort of lots of things to do and that sort of thing. And the book, Phil, where can we get hold of the book, Blockchain Loyalty, then?
Blockchain Loyalty is available on Amazon and all leading good bookstores, as well as iBooks and Kobo.
Fantastic. And I'll put links to both Mike and Phil in the show notes. Look, it's been great. Thanks, guys. It's been really insightful into the industry and, from different perspectives. Any last final comment on what people should do with their loyalty points? One final statement.
If you've got frequent flyer points, use them for upgrades. That's where you get the best value.
Right, okay. Good idea.
But I always get in trouble from my wife for using them for upgrades.
And what about you, Mike? One final party shot.
Oh, look, I think it's because I act with a lot of entrepreneurs and people moving into the space, I think it's always critical to consider what the end game is when people are looking at either becoming part of a loyalty program, trying to start their own, or things of that nature. And so getting the important advice early. I think that you've mentioned Phil's book, which I'm looking forward to reading. I'll be getting him to sign it shortly after we press stop. But I think it's really key to get advice around the right space, around both from the business side, technology side in particular, and also regulatory and legal side.
Right, excellent. Good sound advice. Look, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. We'll probably do this again probably about 6 months just to get your updated views on where things are at. But certainly sounds like it's an industry that we've got to watch, because there are lots of opportunities, but lots of headwinds that we can, that everybody's going to need to manage through, I think.
We'll look forward to coming back and seeing where things
are at
then.
Yeah, look forward to it. Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
So there you have it. Companies remain desperately keen to reward their returning customers and build their brand value. The The blockchain does have some key benefits of allowing companies and partners in their programs to share a single source of truth. This could open up some wide and very interesting new market opportunities. That said, sharing data does have its risks, especially within the new landscape recently announced within the European Union. The loyalty industry is a very traditional industry, and like so many others, it seems to be very cautious in its approach to blockchain technology. Instead, they prefer to leverage the value from their existing customers and their loyalty programs. Innovation's on its way, but it seems to be adopted very slowly. In the next episode of Down the Rabbit Hole, we will be looking at how governments are reacting to the blockchain and its application. We will be talking to Paul Gutauskas, who runs the Canberra Blockchain Centre. For those of you who are outside of Australia, Canberra is the administrative capital of Australia, where most of the federal government resides. Given Paul's background is from Lithuania, he is ideally positioned to compare the two countries' governmental approaches to using the blockchain. Will governments adopt blockchain quickly and effectively? Find out more in the next episode as we continue our journey down the rabbit hole.